Hey everyone. It's Naomi Wolf here of Daily Cloud, and I'm thrilled to be joined today by Carl Schwartz. He's the lead counsel of Stand Up New York. And welcome to you, Mr. Schwartz.
Thank you. So good to be here and with your listening audience, and nice to meet you.
It's great to meet you too. And would you kindly also share the name of your law firm that you work at?
So I am self-employed, actually, Carl J. Schwartz Jr., doing business as Finger Lakes Law Group. We're in the heart of the beautiful Finger Lakes of New York State.
Fantastic. So I reached out to you because I understand that Stand Up New York is an organization that's being more and more active and making a big impact fighting these draconian, unconstitutional measures to suppress our liberties in various ways. As you may know, I am with the Five Freedoms campaign on Daily Clout that is aiming to restore these liberties, and you are doing a really important lawsuit, among others. So please tell us about it.
Yeah, so I've been involved with different groups around the state over the last better part of a year, trying to get our kids back to school and really standing down the governor on just these draconian restrictions that affect businesses and affect theaters and landlords with their evictions and all that sort of stuff. And I could see as I was working on the litigation that the various groups were very, very specific, which was good for their particular topic in their particular area. But it seemed to me that we needed more of an umbrella type organization that was generally geared toward protecting all of our freedoms, so that the phone rings. I don't care what county that call comes from. Somebody's having a freedom violated by the government, and we have an organization that already has attorneys in place, that has people that are volunteering to help out and really push back and make this stuff happen through the courts. And so I connected with Tom Renz, who's an attorney in Ohio. He had started a group called Make Americans Free Again. Right. And their local name for it there was Ohio Stands Up. And I guess they're starting these all across the country. And I was very interested in having one in New York State. And so we've incorporated it as New York Stands Up. You can find us at nystandsup.org. And please visit us. Please feel free to make a donation toward what we're doing, the litigation. And we'll get into that. I'm going to tell you the stuff we're working on. It's both heartbreaking and exciting all at the same time, right?
All right. Thank you. So don't worry, we are going to post all the contact information for where people can reach out to you and support you for sure. Very specifically, tell us about the lawsuit. And I believe Mr. Renz also has either the same or additional lawsuits. We want to know about legal redress for these violations of our rights.
Yes. So the lawsuit we're doing here in New York is being actually prepared by an attorney who I have used before. Our son had the vaccine exemption case that we sued the governor over a year ago, and we won it a year ago.
Oh, wow.
And that's on appeal right now. But this attorney is very, very good with using the government's own data from the CDC, from the state health department. The way she wins her cases is by going in and getting data that the government has produced, albeit maybe the media doesn't want to cover it too much, or maybe the government doesn't make it the most prominent data of the week, but nonetheless, it's there. And once used in litigation, it makes it impossible for the government to deny it because it's their own data. And I've seen this attorney, her name is Patty Finn, do this in our case with our son. And I told the team at New York Stands Up, I says, we need to figure out how to raise the funds because this is Patty's day job, as we say, and I need to get her working on this lawsuit for every New Yorker to get our freedoms back, and I can just be her cheerleader because that's not what I do for a living. That's the skill set we need, and I don't need to get paid, but I need the dollar so I can get her paid to get this thing done.
So just to kind of translate that into non-lawyer language, what I've heard is that you've hired you have hired a really talented attorney to sue New York to sue the governor of New York on behalf of the rest of us for violations of our freedoms. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. And so it goes down like this, right? At the beginning of all this COVID-19, the government's telling us, what this thing is. And we have no reason to believe it or disbelieve it, right? I mean, initially it's new data, it's raw data coming at us. And so people are respectful and
Sure.
we kind of do what they told us to do. But then, inquiring minds start to inquire. We want to know more about this. How does this affect us? What are the numbers? Who really is dying from this, right? And so we started getting into all of that. And I can tell you, as recently as the end of last week, I was introduced to somebody who has actual evidence that this stuff has been doctored. The death certificates are not the clear picture of what has really happened. So whatever COVID-19 is, it is not what we are being told that it is. And we're going to prove that in the lawsuit. Now, why that's important is because once you disprove what the government has purported this thing to be, then it undermines all of the emergency powers,
Right.
so that all of these restrictions end up just becoming null and void.
So this is a very smart approach, and I'm sure you know, but I'll share with everyone else that Rainer Fulmick in Germany has taken the same approach, demanding that the European Union confirm or demonstrate that there's an actual emergency. And he's focused on the manipulation of the PCR tests. But I also know from having reported out on this that the numbers haven't been validated. These dashboards of infections, I build digital dashboards for a living for Daily Clout out of government data and with our developers. And I've never been able to obtain the raw data sets. So literally you can tell any story with a digital dashboard. And I also know that there's a lot of doctors and coroners raising alarms about how deaths are being reported. The way of reporting them in Britain was changed to amplify COVID deaths. And I also know that Minnesota lawmakers subpoenaed or audited death certificates and found a 40% inflation of death certificates. So your approach, as I understand it, of saying, let's validate this data, let's subpoena it, let's check it. Has there been any tampering? Is there any inflation? How are you reporting it? What is a COVID death? What's the process? What is a COVID infection? I hope you include what's the process, or though maybe it's not for this lawsuit. That is just journalism, and that is just law, right? Did it really happen? We've taken all of this on faith, but these numbers have never been validated. And it is not a conspiracy theory. It is just journalism. It's just law to say, okay, let's see the evidence. Let's verify it. So I know your approach is a wise one. And I also am understanding from other lawsuits that if the government can't prove there's an emergency, the emergency powers cannot obtain any longer. So tell me, are you able to give me any more information on the evidence that you have, allegedly that the death certificates are not correct, or that there's something wrong with how deaths are being reported in New York State?
So at this moment, we are very hesitant to say very much about it because, frankly, and I don't know if our source even knows this to the extent that I believe to be the case, I think the government would go after him. I mean, this guy has actual data that's going to disprove what the government's been saying about COVID-19. And, at the beginning of all of this, all of us who were questioning it were conspiracy people, right? I mean, it's like we're the freaks in the room. And I will tell you that more recently, I've had people say to me, listen, I didn't believe all this stuff that you were thinking a year ago, but I have no logical explanation for how things are continuing to be in a form of shutdown that would cause you to think that COVID-19 has gotten worse instead of better as we progress through this. And so a logical person, logically has to end up at the spot where we're saying, listen, we've run out of other reasons why we are still having our freedoms violated at this level, where we're walking around like a bunch of zombies going to restaurants and stores and the post office, with mask on. And we've done a FOIA request of the government on efficacy of masks, and they come back with, we don't have any studies to support that these masks do anything. So
well, I definitely want to publish your FOIA request and that response. That's really important. So as a lawyer, can New York State make us do things through the Board of Health, like mask mandates, without any science to back it up? Is that lawful?
Well, so the attorney we've hired would say, yeah, they can, because you think you have all these constitutional rights, but you really don't. Because what you find out is the minute there's an emergency,
right,
and your legislature hands the power over to a central figure who's no longer governing, but is now ruling, as they create whatever rule they feel like creating, in that moment, legally, you've lost your rights.
Exactly. And just to note for viewers, so far, Five Freedoms and I have been to the Maine State House, which is closed. Legislature is closed. It's under emergency law. We went to the Michigan State House. It's virtually closed under emergency law. New York State is under emergency law, which keeps being extended every 30 days. And Massachusetts, to which I commute, is also under emergency law. Many other states, California, and when you talk to the legislators, they are standing by horrified because they don't count anymore. Like literally it is like, being in a police state, and people really don't understand that. So thank you for bringing that to people's attention. So say you are successful, or how are you going to go about getting the data on death certificates? Can you subpoena it? Does it come out in discovery?
So it comes out in discovery, and that may be documentation that is produced with notices to produce. It may also be testimony that's taken from individuals who know what they're talking about and who've seen data and are willing to come forward and share that information. And, once that information is secured, we'll feel more comfortable about, letting people know, who these people are and what they've got and how they acquired the information.
So you have whistleblowers in lay terms?
Yes.
Understood. And how long will the people of New York State have to wait before there is discovery? Has the lawsuit formally commenced, or are you still preparing for it?
So that is the hardest question that any lawyer ever answers, right? Like, how soon are we going to see this? And the answer is, oh boy, I will surely make a liar out of myself no matter how I answer this question if I just answer it, right? So I'm going to give you the lawyer answer, right? There's no way we can know. We want it to go quickly. We've raised funds that are sufficient that we were able to get the attorney in motion. We are hoping that it is signed, the actual lawsuit, this week and filed by the end of the week.
Good.
And if that occurs, then of course you got the service, and then we got to get the other side served. And the other lawsuits I have served, this process servers show up in Albany, and they're told, well, the Capitol building is closed, so we're not accepting service of papers. I have literally had to drive to Albany, half a dozen lawsuits each for the governor, half a dozen for Commissioner Zucker, and refuse to leave under threat of being arrested. If I'm not gone when the business closes, they're going to have to, arrest me. And I've just said, I'm not leaving. I'm bearing court orders from Supreme Court, New York State Supreme Court judges, and I'm going to serve the governor, and I'm going to serve the commissioner, and that's how it's going to be. And so that's how we do it now. We just make it happen, and then it's done.
Well, this is shocking, but also a timely conversation, because I just heard that in Maine, Representative Rudnicki, who brought me into the State House as her guest at closed State House, has now been punished by the governor, basically, for bringing in a journalist. And, when people really wrap their minds around the fact that state houses are closed, and here in Oregon, the State House is closed, right? It's not a formality. So one of the things I was realizing is you can't report. If you're a journalist and you get hauled out of there and, the person who brought you in is punished, even though it's First Amendment protected reporting, that really impacts everyone because they can't get journalism about what's going on in a closed state house or in the government. But you're adding another layer. You're saying that even judicial proceedings, like one of our branches of government at the state level, can't proceed smoothly because there's no one to accept service. And I'm married to someone who does stuff like that, among the other things he does, to serve it's process server, right? So explain to people what that means. If you're told we will arrest you if you don't leave, we're not accepting service. What is the problem with that in terms of justice and our rights and liberties and our of government? What's wrong with that?
Yeah, so ultimately the problem with it is what separates us as a civil society from any other ragtag group of people that wants to pick up arms and go beat their opponent physically and not resort to the courts, right? We are a civil society that says, listen, we have agreed because we are under law, we are governed by law that is made by our lawmakers, not by some despot, right? We have agreed that if we have a grievance, the redress for grievance is to file papers. So it's not guns and bullets. It's ink on paper. We prepare papers, right? We take those to the place where you file them. We get them filed. And then we have somebody who's not a party to the action, who's an adult, go to the defendant's place of business or their abode or whatever it might be and hand them the papers. And they have a deadline on them and they have to respond to a court. And that's how we keep the three different branches of our government all in nice order, all in check, right?
So if someone refuses to accept service of papers, legal papers, like if someone was trying to divorce me and I didn't accept the service of papers, he couldn't divorce me, right? Like if you're trying to, sue the government and they won't accept the papers, you can't sue them, right? I mean, isn't it an irremediable obstacle if you can't get them to accept the papers?
So there are remedies depending on the type of case. We have a service by publication sometimes, that sort of thing. And we would expect that when you've got some deadbeat person on the other side of a lawsuit that's a loser, right? What we expect they're going to run away. But when the governor hides from it, like what in the world? You've got this whole skyscraper full of lawyers and they're branched across the state. And you just refuse to accept the papers. I'm like, that's unacceptable. I will get in my car and I will drive 4 hours one way to serve the papers. Fine. That's how we're going to do it. That's how we're going to do it.
I really, everyone watching and listening in the state of New York really appreciates your perseverance and your commitment to making justice happen, or the normal wheels of government happen in this case. All right, so you're suing and you've got people who are saying the deaths are being counted wrong. Let me ask you about numbers, if I may. In New York State, where I live, in my county, Columbia County, I did the math, and most news outlets don't do the math. They report wrong. They'll say, oh no, coronavirus infections have gone up 20%, but that could mean 3 more, out of a tiny number, or they'll report data cumulatively. Whereas the right way to do it is you find out the population of your county, you find out the infections and the deaths, and then you map that against other tables of fatalities, in this case, deaths. So when I did that, I found out that Columbia County is not in an emergency. Fewer people are dying with COVID, right? Even with what may be, improper, inaccurately recorded deaths than opioid overdoses or suicide. And if we're not going to declare an emergency and shut everything down for opioid overdoses or suicide, I don't understand legally how it can be an emergency. In Massachusetts, to which I commute, we have 8 deaths a month with COVID, average age 85. It's not an emergency, but both of those states are shut down via emergency law. And people think it's an emergency. Here in Oregon, I had to do the math for my poor mother because the news was reporting, 20% spike, and she thought she was going to, die the minute she stepped outside or met another human being. And I had to show her that deaths with COVID are, far below the top 10 causes of fatality in Oregon. So there's this tampering with the numbers going on all over the place. So my question to you is, if Columbia County doesn't have an emergency, doesn't have any kind of unusual amount of deaths from COVID as opposed to any other respiratory disease or cause of death, how legally can Governor Cuomo say, I have to live under emergency law?
Yeah, we just think he can't. And I'm a law-abiding citizen. I'm an officer of the court, so I have to be very careful about encouraging people to abide by law. That's why I tell them to, make the contribution, let us go to court and handle this in a civilized fashion. That being said, there's going to come a day where people are going to have to answer the question, how are you going to force me to keep wearing a mask when I'm looking around and I'm seeing reality here? It's funny how sometimes the really smart people tell you what something is and what it's going to be and what it's going to do and how it's going to go down. And you're sitting there, the common people, we're sitting back going, yeah, I don't think so. I mean, I'm going to listen. I'm going to be respectful. I'm going to abide by law. But I don't think so, right? And
well,
so
I want to abide by law. Let me just jump in there.
Right,
so,
right.
But having said that, I'm asking a legal question. It's not a rhetorical question. If there is no emergency in Columbia County, how can Governor Cuomo declare an emergency? In other words, can he just make up that it's an emergency and issue an emergency declaration and that's that? I mean, the thing that shocked me about New York state law is that when I read the emergency decree, it seemed like the only person who can remove emergency law is the person who enacted emergency law, which is the governor. It seems like the legislature cannot override the governor on emergency law. Is that correct?
That's not correct to my understanding. I think the legislature is the body that states that there's an emergency or not and gives the powers to the governor. And then the governor just goes with those powers and acts accordingly. But I think where this has gotten complicated is the different counties within the state are responding differently to what those rules and laws are. So, we see public, because you got to remember, in every county, you have a publicly elected sheriff,
right,
a publicly elected district attorney, a publicly elected county clerk. And so some of these people in some counties are just not having it. They're just saying, we are not going to enforce rules that we consider are, one, not legitimate to begin with, two, there's no emergency that would even support our enforcing them, right?
Yeah.
So depending which county line you cross, you may be able to go to a hardware store without a mask on or walk into the restaurant without the mask. And there's no problem because the sheriff there has said, we're just not going to enforce it.
Yeah, and I've heard that that's the case in various counties near me. But as a law-abiding citizen, I'm not satisfied with it because I shouldn't have to break the law if the law is unreasonable or stripping me of my constitutional rights, right? And I don't want to have to risk it. Like, it may be that they won't show up with guns to take me into custody, but I've been taken into custody before for exerting my First Amendment protected rights peacefully, in that case to protest peacefully. And it's a scary, bad experience. You don't want to have to risk it. So I guess what I should ask is, I know the legislature gave Cuomo emergency powers to enact, but rolling them back, are they able to take them away? And if so, shouldn't we also be lobbying our legislature to remove Cuomo's emergency powers? I know that there was talk about them removing his emergency powers because of alleged sexual harassment, which seems kind of, apples and oranges. I mean, I don't like alleged sexual harassment, but he should have his emergency powers removed because he shouldn't have emergency powers. So should we be lobbying the legislature, or can only Cuomo remove his emergency powers short of a lawsuit?
Yeah, at this point, we need to deal with the legislature. What the legislature did actually, and this was right in the middle of my argument of several of my lawsuits, the legislature went in and they actually ended his emergency powers per se, so they could say that. We have not extended the governor's emergency powers. But they turned around like in the same session and they took all of those things that Cuomo had done and they made them law with the full weight of the law of the legislature behind them. That's what we're up against.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. So the legislature's legislated, but technically New York State is still under emergency decree, right? I mean,
only
or
by virtue of whatever the legislature has said. So
no? Oh my
that's
God.
why I've stopped suing the state in a lot of
Right.
my lawsuits now. And I've turned the attention to the county officials in each respective county where there's still a problem with getting our kids to school or opening up the businesses or whatever. We're going after the county.
Why would the legislature? So you're saying the legislature took away, so New York State is no longer under, I mean, it's under emergency laws passed by the legislature, or the
That's what
legislature
I was told.
decided?
Excuse me. That's what I was told in court, that they actually made those things law. And they did it because liberal forces are in control of the legislature at the moment.
Oh my
And
God.
I'm intrigued by that because I know that there are a lot of people who deem themselves to be liberal who are
Yeah.
starting to join our forces.
Yeah, it's true. It's a partisan movement for sure. So you're saying, well, I'm shocked. I mean, you're basically saying if the legislature legislated these, emergency law, the only possible way forward short of your lawsuit or in addition to your lawsuit is for citizens to vote these people out and to get legislators in there who will repeal these laws, right?
That is correct. And thank you for asking that question, because part of the agenda for New York Stands Up
Mhm.
is not just the filing of lawsuits.
Mhm.
It's doing the hard work of figuring out what people who want to run for office and say they're going to represent the interest of their constituents intend to do with that power. Are they easily swayed? Are they concerned about the fact that we all have these freedoms that have been violated? I mean, are they doing this for money, fame, power?
Right.
You know, we need to know why somebody's going to Albany, whether it's in the Assembly or the Senate.
Right. Thank you for that. And so lastly, what is your understanding of why these people are doing these things? And lastly, can there be a legal, like if in the process of suing the governor, could you also force disclosure of possible conflicts of interest, bribes, improper influence? I mean, I've never seen anything like this before in my life, and I have become convinced that a lot of these legislators who are just not acting like normal legislators have conflicts of interest. They must be not serving the people in some way. I was a political consultant at the highest levels. I think there are other relationships that are not disclosed. So is your lawsuit able to force the revelation of any conflicts of interest or any investigations of people who have stripped us of our rights in New York State?
Yes, lawsuits end up being the way to get to the bottom of things in a civil society, right? I mean, we just say, listen, something is wrong here. We are officers of the court. We're going to do due diligence. We're going to go get the data and bring it in. I can tell you, I've been told by one of the legislators that there is so much money thrown around by big pharma with all the political races that people have, that the legislature is not representing the people first. It's representing big pharma first.
Wow.
And then the people somewhere down the line. So that is clearly a problem, and one we're going to have to really get in the faces of each legislator when they're running for office the next time and find out where they are.
Right. And definitely pass, I would say also, disclosure reform in New York State so that everyone can see at a glance how much pharma money or other special interest money their representatives took. I mean, I know the data is out there, but it has to be disclosed, more fully, maybe on every ballot. All right. Well, you've given us so much information and so much hope, although I'm horrified also by what I've heard here about the fact that I'm living in a police state even worse than I realized, because I thought the legislature would be my savior. So that explains why when I called my state representative to say, please remove Cuomo's emergency powers, I didn't even get a call back with my 30 million Twitter impressions and 250,000 followers. That probably explains that. Pretty shocking. So how do people join Stand Up New York, and how do they help you with your really important, crucially important lawsuit?
So it's New York Stands Up, and the website is nystandsup.org. So you want to get on the website and become a member. And You can donate. You'll be able to follow what we're doing with the litigation, because as we do lawsuits for different groups, and in this case, it's for New York Stands Up, we actually post the lawsuit right on the website, right? So you can follow it. And I'm just going to say, you know, freedom is not free. Our forefathers fought for our freedoms. We have enjoyed rights that people have not enjoyed in the history of civilization, and that people are so quick to hand that away is shocking to me. And the reality is, it's hard to explain why certain people are still doing what they're doing, but there are lots of conflicts of interest. A lot of people have been bought up. And at the end of the day, you know, you might not get the mask off unless you just decide you're going to take it off. And I hate that I'm saying that, because it shouldn't be that way, but this is the world in which we find ourselves.
Thank you so much for your service to the state of New York and to the United States. And I hope everyone, you know, goes to your website, supports you, and will be following your incredibly brave and important lawsuit as well. Thank you so much.
Naomi, thank you. Have a great day.
Have a great day. Bye-bye.